And Dr. Scott Brown is our market analyst this week. He's the Director of Strategic Partnerships for the University of Missouri's College of Agriculture, Food and Natural Resources. And we always love to hear what he has to say with what's going on in the world of agriculture. And starting off, Scott, could you give us an update on what you're watching on the trade front? We haven't talked much regarding the USMCA deal lately.
Yeah, so I think that's still one of the front and center issues for 2019. We do need a new USMCA agreement in place, and I continue to remind us that getting tariffs down on things like hams going to Mexico could really be important, especially for the pork industry, as we're talking about large supplies of pork on the marketplace today. We'll see how Congress handles USMCA, but it looks like at this point we will see a successful conclusion to USMCA as we go through 2019.
And I also read an article where you were stressing the importance of trade with Japan. Why do you think that's so important for this country?
Yeah, you look back at exports of beef out of the United States. Japan was certainly one of those countries extremely critical to us in 2018. But as I look ahead, I just keep reminding us that we face a tariff of roughly 38.5% on many of the beef muscle cuts that are going to Japan. You look at some of the other countries that we often talk about as our competitors, and I pick Australia. They're already setting at 28%, and with trade agreements they have in place with Japan already, those tariffs continue to fall to 9% as you look long term. We need to be competitive in terms of tariffs our own product faces going into Japan, because that market's going to grow in front of us, and that's really a high quality market, and we know U.S. beef is certainly one of those high quality products. So I think a successful U.S.-Japan agreement at some point down the road is really important. I sometimes say thank goodness Australia's had some dry weather and now some flooding issues that have really kept their domestic supplies in check. Otherwise, I think they'd be much stronger competitors for us.
Yeah, Scott, and with all that talk about Japan makes me think about how important the relationship is with Nebraska and Japan. And moving on, I also wanted to get your thoughts on USDA's 2019 farm income estimate. When we were talking before the interview, you told me this is a pretty interesting topic for livestock producers. What were some of the numbers in this report that stuck out to you?
Yeah, overall, when you look at just total livestock cash receipts that USDA is suggesting for 2019, which the report they turned out last week was their first estimate for 2019, up $4.6 billion in livestock cash receipts. A fair amount of that was increases in dairy cash receipts, but also they had cattle cash receipts up $2.7 billion in 2019 relative to 2018. That's combinations, I guess, of both higher prices and additional cattle slaughter as we look ahead here in 2019. I even look at the hog side and I go, we know we've got a lot of supplies of pork to deal with this year and likely lower prices. USDA was only down $700 million when you look at pork cash receipts. I think that's also pretty strong demand indication, just given the increase in supplies of pork being brought to the marketplace this year.
Yeah, and staying on the topic of hogs, we have a story on next week's show where we'll give some updates on African swine fever and how that's impacting the pork industry. Why is this a topic that people should care about?
Yeah, Troy, you only have to look a little bit at what's going on in China to say this could be just the biggest issue we face in 2019. You think about a country with 40 million sows roughly, who has had at least officially reported over 120 cases of African swine fever to date, and you see those out there suggesting upwards of 25, maybe even 30% cuts in Chinese pork production. If we see that kind of cut, the ability for Chinese pork production to cover the domestic demand that's out there, I think will be difficult, which suggests some of us are going to get a chance to trade more products into China. The Chinese might actually want to buy some U.S. pork, especially when you think about what's traditionally been a big soybean market for us. African swine fever may curb some of the interest in growth in soybean trade to China. They might be more interested in U.S. pork under this scenario. I remind us that we sure don't need African swine fever here in the United States. That could be the other side of a very tough situation if that were to unfold.
Definitely something we'll continue to track, impacting a lot of the sectors of ag for sure. So as we let you go, our viewers love it when our market analysts give marketing advice or risk management tips. What are a couple of the top things on your mind that you want to make sure producers know about before we let you go?
Yeah, so I guess I start maybe with where folks don't think about these days. You know, corn prices have been down the last couple of weeks. When I look at futures markets, I think it's always not at top of mind when we've had lower feed costs to think about locking in those feed costs, but it has been an opportunity for lower feed costs to maybe be locked in through 2019. You know, I look at what's been happening in hog futures markets these days, where we've seen a pretty good rally the last week and a half to 2 weeks. It might be an opportunity to let someone else have some of that risk about whether hog prices go higher or not. I'm certainly looking for opportunities to lock in a floor without giving up some upside potential, of course, given that ASF could still be a large market mover. But laying off some risk might be good. Even on the cattle side, you know, I often talk about it, to me right now, when I look at markets, they're sideways on average, but maybe there's a little more downside risk than upside potential. Using some of those risk management tools to, again, let somebody else have some of that risk of downside price moves might be important as we go through 2019.
Dr. Scott Brown from the University of Missouri, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. We'll do it again soon.
Thanks much, Troy.